So here we are on the last panel, and as we said, this one we will just finish the conference with art and survivor empowerment. A panel on which we will have Marcello Lussana, sound designer and researcher, Anika Krbetschek, artist, and Dolly Sen, artist and activist. It will be moderated by Lily Martin, who is a researcher also from the Pop-Up Institute and Alanus University of Arts and Social Sciences. So I would like to ask all of you to come on stage with me. So Lily, before I give the floor to you, I will just introduce you. Lily Martin, she's a psychologist and scientific associate at Alanus University of Arts and Social Sciences in Heidelberg University. And in her doctoral studies at Heidelberg University, she investigates the interrelation of body movement and psychiatric illnesses, mainly schizophrenia. She is also one of the co-founders of the Pop-Up Institute for Science Communication, an interactive project together with those affected by schizophrenia, arts therapists and artists on the use of art-based methods to reduce stigma. So I give the floor to you. I know it's in good hands, and looking forward to hear the presentations.
Thank you, Elena. Thanks, Elena, for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me. I'm very honored to be here tonight and to lead this panel with these very special guests. And I also want to say it's very late and you have had a lot of input and you're still here. So thank you for bearing with us. And yeah, I hope it's worth it. This panel isn't about me, but about the great speakers who are here with us today. I will introduce them one by one before their talks, and we will hear 3 different talks on the use of the arts to empower survivors or people who have experienced mental illnesses. And then we will have a short discussion rounds amongst the speakers, and then open the floor to all of your questions. So let's jump right in. We will start with Marcello, and I'll introduce you quickly, and then you can start. Marcello is a Berlin-based research associate and PhD candidate and also coordinator of the project Social Interaction Through Sound Feedback Sentire at the Department of Musicology and Media Studies of Humboldt University. Besides doing research, he produces computer music for audio-visual performances, dance, theater, and also live electronics. And in summer 22, for Mental, the art festival on schizophrenia, which you've seen in the movie just now, he created an artwork in collaboration with people with schizophrenia, which makes hearing voices somewhat tangible. And I was also very honored to be part of it, and I'm happy to hear your talk.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. And yeah, we'll talk tonight about the project Sentire. Maybe some of you were here for the performance at 4:30 p.m. Who was not here, I will also show a very short video. Work it is, and a bit the background of this work, both the artistic work, but also the research work that I've been doing. And then also, yeah, an overview of what we did, what was this collaboration about. So to give an overview how we got to what you saw at 4:30 if you were here, or I will explain it also. My slides are not seeable yet. Okay, now it's there, the cable. Exactly, Sentire is a participative, interactive sound performance. And maybe a few words about that. Participative, because usually we involve people from the audience. Interactive, because it uses a technology that affects the sound. So depending how the participants interact between each other, the sound changes. And I show you a short video that gives a bit an overview of what the system is. That is probably the best explanation than many words. Oh, sorry. No. So, yeah, I think you got an overview of how the system works. And so the system detects proximity and touch between two participants. And these events then are turned into sounds. Yeah, this is a schema. You don't have to understand everything. It's only to have a rough idea that we have a signal coming from the bracelets. If you saw the performance, in the performance today we use a cable version that has bracelets. And so there are two bracelets, so two signals. One is a transmitter and one is a receiver. And then we measure how much the receiver increases. So that signal increases, the more the two participants are getting close. And the maximum signal for the system is when the two persons touch it for the first time. And these are mapped to some different sound parameter, like, for example, volume is the most obvious, but also pitch and some filters. And in case you're already wondering, what you saw in the performance was with cable. What you saw in the video instead, well, we didn't fake it in the video, is a wireless version that is in prototype right now. We decided not to use it for today because it's still a prototype. But in the video, you didn't see any bracelets for this reason. In the video was already the wireless version. So the project started in 2016. And the system is actually not my or our, as Sentire team, invention. It actually was part of a European project called MetaBody. And the artist and researcher Jonathan Royce was using such a system. And it was meant as a workshop and a collaboration. And so I got to learn such a system from him. And then in 2016, I reframed the usage of this system or making to the concept of Sentire. So this conceptual idea of using one word for different meanings, like hearing and touch, and not only touch, but also feeling the closeness to another person. And in Italian, we have this word sentire that is quite general. It's actually also to other senses a bit extended. And so I find it interesting to work exactly on this aspect, especially on body perception. That was the interest of the system, or what to promote with a system, with the experience of a system. And so in 2016 became a performance, and then it became on one hand the subject of my PhD that is still ongoing, and from 2019 it became a research project involving other people and under the direction of Professor Jin-Young Kim at the Humboldt University in Berlin. And so the particular aspect of this system that is on one hand is a digitally designed experience, but it happens in the real world. So it's not like virtual reality where the experience is happening in this totally in this virtual world, even though of course we still sense, still have the sense of our body. So there is this particular mixture of one part is digitally designed and one part is happening in the real world. As I mentioned before, so the main goal, both for the performance but then also for the research project, was to use Sentire to increase the awareness of body perception. And this can be very valuable for the so-called somatic practice. Somatic practice are, for example, yoga, qigong, tai chi, so all the practice where the focus is on body perception. Often there is also some movement involved, and usually this movement is slow. And through this kind of or the focus of all these practices, even though they can be very different, is always to increase body awareness and use it in different ways. For example, Tai Chi can be used as a martial art practice. Yoga is more for health, usually, and so on. So, our intention here was to use such a system and connect it with these practices, meaning use this as a tool, as a support. Of course, you can experience exactly the same without Sentire. I mean, dancers do it all the time. If you see two dancers dancing on stage, they are all the time playing with proximity and touch and body perception. So it's nothing new that we are actually offering through Sentire, but it can give the chance to explore it in a different way and to shape it through sound. That's what makes it special. And so this connects with the fact of how we usually experience reality. So usually reality depends on our perception of the environment, and this creates somehow a perception loop. So we perceive the environment, but the environment also influences ourselves. And this is even more relevant with an interactive technology, where not only we react to the sound, but also our reaction shapes the sound. I try to go a bit faster because I noticed that I'm a bit behind. So from this point of view, Sentire is not meant to be only an art performance, but also movement practice that can be also used in the therapy context. And I think, yeah, this was the bridge to the current research project, where we also conducted some studies in, for example, with couple therapy. We did a quite big study with couple psychotherapy. This was also related to the fact that couples have no problem in touching each other, especially during COVID times. So it was, so we don't have the results yet, but they look positive, I can only tell you that. And here I will go very quick. So the study of proximity is called proxemics, that considers not only the physical distance between two persons or objects, but also the cultural value, the relationship that we have in the distance. And what is particularly relevant is that this relationship has different aspects that has been studied in first place by Edward Hall in the 60s. And he divided the space, he considered different aspects of how we can consider proxemics. That is physical distance, of course, but also, for example, heat, smell, and different parameters, even linguistic in case there is, or as in this case of Sentire, also sound. So we can also go quick. So he divided the space of proxemics in 4 categories. So one in intimate, that is the closest, personal, social, and public. We can have here a nice graph. What I wanted to mention about this, that this looks very symmetric and perfect, but in reality, that's not how we perceive proxemics. Proxemics actually fits better in such a drawing, so very unclear shape of how we perceive a physical distance. And I will skip to the, sorry. So we use this system together with a pop-up institute. There was a collaboration between different artists with a goal to create an installation that was a mixture of performance, installative work, artworks of different kind. And there were not only artists, but also a few people who experienced schizophrenia. And there was not really clear guidelines at the beginning how we could collaborate. I mean, the rough idea was, at least for what concerns Sentire, and our collaboration as Sentire team, was to use different sound material that makes sense in the context of the group work. And as some of the collaborators experience hearing voices, especially in the past during some acute phase of their psychosis, we asked them to list the content of the voices, at least what they could recall. And we recorded again these sentences with different people. So each sentence was even spoken by different people of the whole group. And we used this audio material for Sentire. We decided to divide most of the content was quite negative, so even like kill yourself, or what are you doing, or crazy shit, and so on. We use it for the distance, so approaching each other or changing the distance triggers these voices. When you're very far apart, there is a lot of reverb, so the voices sounds quite far apart. And the closer you get, this reverb gets less, so the voice gets also clearer. So the intention was that the more you approach to each other, the more you feel close to this voice. And then there were not many, but a few positive content voices, and we decided to use this for the touch moment, so to find let's say, a positive resolution of this tension. And when you stay in touch, then this voice gets repeated over and over, and turns into a soundscape. And so this was basically what we did, almost in 1 year of work. Maybe describe it like this sounds quite trivial, but this involved some brainstorming first, some preparation of the system, so software development and so on, and a few tests together with the three persons who collaborate, that are Konstantin, Matthias, and Verena. I mention only their first name, first because they also want like this, but also because of privacy reason, because these are the persons who experience schizophrenia. And thank you.
Thank you, Marcello. If you have questions, just keep them in mind or write them down. We will come to the questions later. We will just hear all speakers first, if that's okay. Next speaker is Anika Krbetschek. Did I pronounce your name right? It's very complicated. Anika is a multidisciplinary artist and curator working artistically through mental experiences such as dissociation, trauma, and compulsion. She has been working with and learning from an art therapist. This is why her approach is process-oriented and therapeutic or educational rather than academic or technical. She's using art for psychological processing, for the transformation of inner movement, and for finding ways to represent and translate psychological phenomena. Welcome, Anika.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for inviting me, also Elena. And thank you for everyone being here and being in the live stream as well. As you heard, is it on? Yeah. As you heard, my development of having an artistic approach is very much based in being in art therapy, and also today my artistic working process is very linked to how I process psychologically. So I thought I first confront myself here with the question of what does that even mean to use art therapeutical, and also which concept of art is evolving through the connection between art and therapy. And I want to give a very short disclaimer or kind of a trigger warning, because I'm going to touch the topic of abusement and violence as well, but I'm not going to be explicit. Yeah, so coming to this question and also kind of investigating on the relationship between art and therapy, I carved out some characteristics I found in my own working way artistically, which I think are linked to what I experienced in art therapy. But I will not elaborate on them, but I will show you a project I did, which I think represents how a therapeutic process within an artwork worked for me, and also shows the potential I think that art holds, which maybe no other discipline holds. And that is to find a language for emotions and experiences which would be in silence otherwise, or, I don't know, unsayable without art. And also, yeah, because being an artist but also being a survivor, I learned that I need ways to express and process experiences, but I also learned that some memories can't be approached directly. You have to find ways around it, and I think art holds the potential of finding these ways through abstraction and through metaphors, and that might be visual, or that might be coded in poems, or that might be in the movement of an art performance, and for me would be the next step to bring that on stage, and that can also mean showing off your work in an art exhibition. But in the example I brought today, it was quite literally bringing therapy on stage. This was a reading performance called Saying No. And it was basically just me sitting on stage with my diary and reading out of it. And this contained text and poems I wrote to get along violence experiences and abusement experience in nearly 10 years. And my reading was experimentally live translated by the musician Pepe Rapnak. And it was kind of an experiment, because the background was, when I was reading these diary entries on my own, I would always experience re-traumatization, so having flashbacks and stuff. And I thought bringing this intimate and also ugly moment on the stage and framing it into an artistic act would kind of give me some control back over the situation again. But of course, I couldn't know before. It was also kind of a risk. It could also just me fainting away, having my flashback on the stage, and that's it. But actually, I had a very empowering and therapeutic moment on the stage. And I also got resonated from the audience, them having a therapeutic moment as well. So I think this project shows at least two things. First of all, processing trauma in art means to also process the experiences that initiated them, as you do in therapy if you're lucky. And another thing is that it also brings light to the fact that mental illnesses, so-called illnesses, which are linked to certain experiences, such as trauma, might be linked to abusement. These are framed in societal contexts and linked to structures of powers and also hegemonic structures. And that's why I think that making mental conditions visible through art is not only an act of self-therapy, but also linked to, also can point to societal issues, systematic issues, and stands in an activistic and justice-related context. I have no video of that because I decided to not show any records of that performance, because I feel like that is something so existential that I shouldn't repeat it. But I have a very short passage out of it. I'm going to read it, and you have to imagine that a 200 BPM techno song is playing in the background with a voice telling you the rules how to be a good girl. I prepare my body for the abuse until there is none anymore. I tell my ankles that they can bear the strain, so my core doesn't have to. I also tell them that I can make it next time, that this is the last preparation. And then poof, poof, poof. Yeah. Okay, short insight. So yeah, being able to depict emotions and also mental conditions into artworks brought up another question in my mind, which contains the relationship between mental condition and art itself. And this question, I think, is quite problematic, not only because of the term illness, but also because of its problematical historical background. Because until today, there have been attempts to categorize signs of mental illnesses in artworks. And this categorization is linked to a history of discrimination, separation, and oppression. So for me, it's very important at this point to notice that most of the art of artists with mental so-called illnesses are also disabled artists, and most of the artists in this field of outsider art, their art is not about mental illness. And to take their art seriously and recognize that as art means to take their contents and their intentions seriously and not to interpret them as a sign of their illness. Still, for me, I think it's possible to use this question to analyze my own work, because I aim to explore my mental condition on purpose through art, and also I think recognizing some specific patterns and motives in my artworks is kind of a psychological reflection tool for me. So that's why I'd like to show one of a few characteristics in my paintings, which I think are linked to my mental condition. And this one I call rawness or fleshness. And it's linked to psychological and physical pain based on trauma and mental, physical, and sexual abusement. And you can see this a lot in the painting series Amöba. This is the Gardens of Pain, which is from the Amöba series. And the series is using the concept of unicellular beings and their way to move as a metaphor for psychological growth based on trauma. You can also see this in a much older painting of me, which I did when I was 16 or 17, when I was in art therapy. And actually, when painting this and seeing the structures while painting them myself, like this bloody, fleshy stuff, that actually caused me a flashback back then. And the interesting thing about this was that I got back a memory which I seem to have lost. So I got an insight about what initiated my trauma at this moment, and that was quite interesting for me, and I think it made also very clear how the connection between doing art and processing psychologically can work. So being out of art therapy and becoming an artist myself, I think there came a very important differentiation between using art only for self-therapeutic purposes and working as an artist using these approaches. Now I have to ask myself, how can my emotional translation, which I might have done in a very intimate moment, still be understandable for others? And also, how can my individual experience deliver a societal context? That's why I would like to dig deeper in the last part on art's role in destigmatization processes. I'm using an installation as an example, which I did this year, for why emotional empathy is so important for destigmatization processes, and also why an artistic moment can be so potent to create this emotional empathy. This installation is called Safety Order Compulsion Disorder, and it's an interactive installation I did together with artists without compulsive disorder in collaboration about compulsive hand washing. And it all started with my compulsive acts, compulsive thoughts coming back, and I had this urge to transform the feelings around that. And since it's a part of the disorder to hide it, and also I couldn't find any other art project regarding this topic yet, I very much also feel the urge to make it visible. So additionally to my own therapeutic process, I thought about the societal context. And then I wanted to use the new perspective the pandemic gave us all on compulsive hand washing, because it got a new meaning, and also counting while hand washing, washing your hands, got a new meaning. So in the end, in this installation, the inner psychic processes of compulsive hand washing were juxtaposed with the feelings that can be associated with hand washing in a pandemic crisis, because both are likewise repetitive and both are in this emotional conflict field between fear and safety, and this artistic adaptation encouraged individual as well as collectivistic thoughts, asking what creates the feeling of safety in you and in me and in us. And I will show you a short video just to have you or not. Just not working. I swear it worked before, but if not, then not. I would just try to explain it. Okay. Eins, zwei, drei, vier, fünf und eins. und 15, und 1. Nur noch einmal, dann ist das perfekt. 1, 2, 3, 4. Dann höre ich auf. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 und 1. So yeah, you'd come into the room, you'd wash your hands. The moment you open the taps, the voice started. They started to speak in fear, they started to count, and the room was full of bass and sound. You couldn't depict that in the video. Like the whole room was reacting to opening the tap and being in the room. And also we had some synchronized light installation in the big video art I made and some other details which are not depicted in the video, but they all were kind of a translation of a compulsive act, and they were synchronized to the rhythm and the dramaturgy of a procedure of compulsive hand washing. And that all aimed to create an emotional reaction by the recipient in order to make them empathize through their own spectrum of emotions. So it was very important to make them feelings they already know. To make them feelings they already know in order to let them understand the phenomena in their frame. Because everybody knows fear, everybody knows anxiety, everybody knows desperation. And in the moment these feelings get abstracted, emotional empathy gets possible. This installation was shown this year at 48 Hours Neukölln Arts Festival, and I did it together with the great artists Marco Borowski and Karl Schulz, and that's from me.
Thank you, Anika. We will have questions later. It's so sad that we can't ask questions right away, but we will do a longer question round later, I hope. Next speaker, last speaker, is Dolly Sen. Dolly is a Norwich, UK-based artist, and her art practice crosses writing, performance, film, and visual art. By being subversive, humorous, and radical, she's interested in a debate and in social experiments around themes of madness, sanity, the other, and acceptable behaviors from an unusual and unconventional position of power. She is interested in these topics because she has been labeled mad herself, and although she thinks her challenging of injustice and vicious systems of the so-called normal world makes perfect sense. Welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me to Berlin to do this. And I'm very glad I am the last person because I'm getting tired myself. So, so if I fall asleep, you know, yeah. So, basically, I'm going to talk. Well, this talk also has a trigger warning, but I won't be talking about details. I will be talking about things in a more kind of general way. I first came into the psychiatric system at age 14, and that was probably because beforehand, in my childhood, I experienced, severe abuse. I experienced poverty. I experienced discrimination. We were the only brown family in a neighborhood of all white people. I also was in the care system for a little while. So yeah, it was quite an intensely painful childhood. But after one kind of serious act of violence, I basically lost my mind and started to hear voices and see things. So this is my little diagram, and this is an equation that if you take the top thing out or the bottom thing out, things will get better. But what I found the mental health system did was just add more trauma and kind of maintain the trauma that had happened to me. So I could not get justice through the mental health system. In fact, I was ensured that I would not get justice through the mental health system. And I went to see a child psychiatrist, and I was so terrified of hearing voices and seeing things that I wanted to speak to this child psychiatrist. I wanted to tell her what was happening at home and all sorts of things. But I went into the room, and she didn't even look at me. She was behind a clipboard, and she said, "So what's wrong with you then?" I just felt myself shrivel up and become small, and I couldn't tell her. So that was the first act of injustice I experienced in the mental health system. And the thing about entering the mental health system in the UK or wherever in the world is that you will keep facing different kinds of injustice. So, oh, it works, cool. I don't understand why, I do understand why there are billions, even trillions of pounds and dollars or euros is poured into trying to find the reason why people go mad in the brain. They could say it's the broken brain. I'm going to let the whole world into a secret. No, it's because of the broken heart. Whether it's through stuff that has happened to you in your childhood, whether you're on the other side of oppression or anything, it's because of the broken heart. And what makes me so angry is that psychiatry thinks the way to cure this broken heart is to break it even further. So, this is lots of pictures of my artwork. So, the picture on the left, I put in a psychiatric hospital because I think sometimes the institution needs reminding that, without our human rights, what do we have? And I wanted to also put this feedback, I don't know if you have them here in Germany, that, in the UK, if you go to the toilet, you have to press, which, is your toilet experience bad, good? First of all, why should I tell you? And I don't know if the person before me has washed their hands, so I am not going to give you my feedback. But I thought you put in this machine on psychiatric wards where they do control and restraint might just kind of dislodge people's kind of complacency about this act that has happened so many times. The brilliant Colin spoke yesterday, and he lives in Brixton. I used to live in the town down the road in Streatham, but why have we met in Berlin? I don't know. We also were in the same hospital, which I'll talk about later. Anyway, I became an activist quite early in my kind of my experience as a patient, and I was stood outside the Moseley Hospital with a placard saying awful things are happening in this hospital, and I realized something that the people passing by, the ordinary people on the street, will just look at me and think I'm a loony, nuts. They're not going to listen to what I have to say. And the institution behind me, I would make not a ripple of difference or impact with my placard. So I realized, actually, I need to think a bit more deeper, a bit more creatively about how to kind of try to make a difference, or how to try to share my voice. Unfortunately, the UK mental health system is going backwards, not forwards or sideways. There is this thing, and I don't know if you have it in Germany, but in the UK, psychiatry likes to give very beautiful poetic names to awful things. So this thing called serenity integrated mentoring actually is if you call the crisis team too many times, the police become involved, and you get a threat. If you keep doing this, you'll go to prison. And actually, people have gone to prison. It says it's care, and actually, how can care be? Can this be defined as care when it's care being withheld? And it's like you call for help. You call for help, you get ignored. You call for help, you get ignored. You call for help, you get ignored. And then you call for help one too many times, and then it becomes criminalized. And it's like I said before, you talked about, I'm not, the system, the world is maddening. And to kind of give that on a plate to somebody who is in distress, how can you ever call ourselves a civilized society? So yeah, I'm part of the kind of to try and fight against this in the UK, and more and more mental health trusts in the UK are adopting this approach. So yeah, in the UK, you can go to jail for being too mad. So social injustice is, I'm also part of the kind of disability rights movement in the UK. And what I find, you can be not disabled enough. And if you're not disabled enough, like my diagram shows, you can be seen as a scrounger. You can be thrown off benefits and be sent to work, and et cetera, et cetera. Or you can be too disabled where you're a burden to society. You're either a scrounger or a burden to society. And during the pandemic, I heard from disabled friends who were sent do not resuscitate forms in the post without any discussion. They were expected to say, if I get the COVID, it's okay, you don't have to resuscitate me, or put me even on a ventilator. So yeah, it's being put in a lose-lose situation, being in a double-bind situation. Whatever you do, you can't win. So yeah, there's a lot of things to fight, against. And somebody talked earlier about personality disorder. I am full of rage, by the way, but I've learnt to channel my rage into art and other stuff. But I have seen mostly women, but it has happened to men, who have been abused in childhood, go to psychiatry to get some relief from their trauma and their pain. And what they are instead are gifted the personality disorder, which means if they go to the police or the court system, because there's the idea that women with personality disorder are manipulative or are attention-seeking or are liars. So the person might want to go to the courts to prosecute their abusers, but thanks to psychiatry, they are gifted a way that their story and their lives and their right to justice will never happen. So there's also lots of cultural injustice, which kind of is linked to what was talked about yesterday. I did some work with the Wellcome Collection in the UK, and I looked at their mental health archives, and what I found was only 10% of the archives in the Wellcome Collection were by survivors. It was mostly done by professionals like psychiatrists, psychoanalysts, and things like that. And one of the oldest depictions of a mad woman at the Wellcome is this picture on the left. And what's shocking about this picture? If this was a fictional depiction, but if it were a real person, the artist, basically what I'm trying to say, what is her story? She has no right to tell her story. She has been, given rags to wear. She might have been put there by a husband who wanted to dump her so he could have a younger person. We don't know her story, but what we are given by this picture is that she is not human. Colin talked about Freud yesterday. I also think he's a bastard. He, at the beginning of his career, understood there was a link between abuse and mental distress. He shared this idea with his colleagues. They weren't interested. Bloody hell, 5 minutes is all. I will rush through. But anyway, I will rush through. This is the kind of the background. But basically, a lot of my work with archives is to ensure that the survivor voice is there. So there's me with a clitoris on my head, talking about madness in women because in Madness in Women in the Victorian times, you could, if you didn't go to church, you were a mad woman. If you liked to masturbate, you were a mad woman. So this is my kind of a performance protest, and I'm going to be buried with that hat on. I live in Norfolk now. I'm a Londoner, but I live in Norfolk, and there's this lady called Lorena Bulwer who was given embroidery resources while she was on a lunatic ward in a workhouse. And instead of writing, saying Bible verse, she insulted everyone. This is why I like her. But anyway, we both went to the same hospital. So I found about Lorena's story, it was all written by professionals. So as a mad woman in that space, I wrote my own version of what I thought her story was. And I've got a few copies if anyone would like a free copy. But I also took up embroidery inspired by her, and I stood outside my hospital and basically said it sucked balls. After that protest with the Maudsley, I thought, how can I show what is going on at the Maudsley, what damage is being done in there? I TripAdvisored the Maudsley Hospital. It became viral before it was taken off by TripAdvisor. And what is brilliant about it is that years after I heard people, do you know the bosses are still talking about that? I said, yes. So it reached the higher, the people at the top. So this is what I mean. Creativity gives you ways in that just simple protest doesn't. You know the Mr. Men series in Germany? This is the way I show the public what it's like to be in the mental health system. So like Mr. Discharged from services for smiling once. Little Miss Idealistic, newly qualified mental health professional, not yet crushed by the system. I've been signposted to so many signposted that I look like a bloody signpost, and so on. There is a risk assessment form whenever you go to see a mental health professional, or especially if you're an inpatient. But what I've done with this, I have reversed it. I am risk assessing the mental health system. So I'm talking about neglect, I'm talking about violence, I'm talking about all sorts of things. And this is what I do. I subvert things. I try to show the truth about the thing or the process by subverting them. I'll skip this bit. I use art as truth-telling and art as evidence. So here, in the UK, there are rainbow lanyards to show you that you are LGBT-friendly. And I said, no, I don't want that. I want to know who the bigots are. I want them to wear I am a bigot lanyard. And one person can stand up to a government institution, and this is what China was talking about, the benefit system, and these are some of the people who died, and we did a silent protest outside the government department with the names of the hearts of the people who died. So this is a clip from the documentary I did about my protest at the DWP. Can you please play it? I'm sectioning the DWP, by the way.
We are sick of you. And as doctors, we have come to assess you as you have assessed many people to their death, to their starvation. So DWP and the workers inside, are you dressed appropriately to condemn people to their death? Do you use a computer to destroy people's lives? I therefore section you to be unfit. You are a danger to yourself and other people.
Because of all these changes, thousands of us have died. And if these changes keep on happening, what more proof do we need that you have lied? Which side are you on, the boys, or which side are you on? Which side are you on, the boys, or which side are you on?
Justice for Jodie and thousands more. Thousands.
Justice for Jodie, yes.
The DWP didn't appreciate being sectioned. They called the police. We told the officer we just thought it was wrong people starved to death or were bullied into suicide. Eventually...
They let us go. In the next video, I'm just showing that the psychiatric system can pathologize anything. So I am... Oh, sorry. I was talking to... See, I told you I'm tired. So I am giving Alexa a mental state examination.
And I'm going to give her a mental state examination. Alexa, what is your name?
My name is Alexa.
What year is it? Alexa, what year is it?
It's 2018.
Alexa, who is the Prime Minister?
The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is Theresa May.
Well done. Alexa, what do you think about?
I think about how I can better help people.
Alexa, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling a little bookish, as today it's Book Lovers Day, an unofficial holiday that encourages people to pick up a book. If you feel like listening to a free audiobook, just ask Alexa, sign me up for Audible and you can enjoy a 30-day trial.
Alexa, do you know how to have a conversation? I don't think so.
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Alexa, do things seem unreal to you?
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Alexa, do you think people are out to harm you?
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Alexa, are you avoiding the questions?
Sorry, I'm not sure.
Alexa, do you hear voices?
Sorry, I don't know that.
Alexa, do you hear my voice?
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Alexa, you're being very evasive.
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Alexa, you're being repetitive.
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Alexa, you're not engaging.
Sorry, I don't know that.
Alexa, I think you need sectioning.
Sorry, I don't know that one.
You will though soon. Enough, mate. Cheery bye.
I nearly talked into that again. But yes, I have a lot of fun in my art. I mean, I'm tackling very serious and very painful subjects, but I also have a lot of fun in my work. Is that it? Ask me about how to be subversive, I will tell you. But at the moment, the revolution will be pathologized and over-medicated, because any anger you will have will be pathologized if you're at the receiving end of injustice. So we have to find ways where the revolution will not be pathologized and over-medicated. And so, yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you all for these wonderful talks and for the laughs and for the insights. I'm going to ask some short questions and then we can have all your questions. Just to sum it up, we have heard that all of you use art to empower survivors and in very different but equally creative ways. Marcello collaborated to translate experiences of schizophrenia into an existing art piece. Anika draws from art therapy and approaches art as a therapeutic process. And Dolly is an art activist who uses art in a political and very funny way to change the unjust system. So all of you have in common that you don't just do art for the art's sake, but that you use it to communicate something specific. And hence my first question to you is, what characteristics does your art have, or does art need to have an impact on an audience or to change something?
This is not any news to art activists, but we all know, us art activists, that you need three things. The thing needs to be visually interesting or arresting, so people will stop in their tracks. It has to make emotional connection with the person, so it needs those two things, but it also needs the third thing, which, you know, it's called the eye, the heart, and the hand. It's the triad. And so the third thing is you have to show people how they can make change. So that's, in art activism, we use those three methods.
For me, this is a quite special question because I already mentioned, like, I'm working very process-orientated, and I see kind of a conflict field between having that and also trying to be compensable and build a frame for others, because especially with like painting, which is quite a static medium when shown, and the art is actually happening while the process, and everything is going to be transformed, and then you have this end result, and there's like not everything is shown in this medium. And also, like, when I have to go further than this raw expression, really create this frame for others to relate and build a relationship through the artwork, not only understand it, but build a relationship with the artwork. I have to think how to abstract my feelings. And I think a good way is to collaborate with other artists which might have different experiences or similar experiences, and find ways to show this work together. Also having some interactiveness, as I did in this installation, because I think then people will feel more being a part of what happens, and also sometimes the body is used more, so also physical sensations and impressions will be used to create an emotional reaction. And the last thing maybe would be to contextualize the artwork, which I do now, which I didn't do before, because I didn't want to be too concrete about my condition and kind of like not to out myself too much. And I think there's an important point behind this for artists with mental diseases or also disabled artists, because there's still these labels being used to stigmatize in general, but also in the art world to reduce artists in an ableistic way. So it's a privilege to have this choice to use these labels or to contextualize your work.
For what concerns me, the main focus of my work, and also what motivated my work, is body perception and experience. And I mean, many artworks are also going into this direction, but especially in the digital art world is something that I personally missed a lot, and also coming from the background of music and electronic music, that is still a big debate. And so to me, for me, it was very important to use something that was involving human perception and real experience, and there are many ways to do it, of course, not only using interactive technology. So, and that's also the bridge to therapy, because that's also something is used a lot in different kind of therapy, especially so-called alternative therapies.
Thank you. So it's about experience, also making an experience as an audience to understand the art, maybe? Yeah. How is your way of making art empowering for yourself as artists, but also for the viewers or the participants or the people who are the survivors, for other survivors?
Hold on. So I think it was quite clear that I use art in a therapeutic way, and I feel like it's having some therapeutic effect, so I won't be talking too much on that. But I also want to say that sometimes working around mental condition with mental condition can also be more triggering than having the therapeutic effect as well. Like I had this with this installation. Actually, my compulsive thoughts were way worse after this work because, yeah, it was no wonder I was in this room, which was designed to make you feel nervous and to kind of trigger my compulsion for hours and hours and days. So, yeah, I got very stressed out from my own artwork. And sometimes you can also use this kind of psychological risk in a therapeutic way as well, like kind of like confrontation therapy. I had to think of when I was in boxing training, where I kind of get punched again, but it's consensual, and this can be a healing moment in some kind of way because you're making like new experience are getting kind of like overwritten, but of course it can also be too challenging, and it's always a fine line when it comes to trauma regarding protecting yourself and confronting yourself. Yeah, and regarding the therapeutic effect on others, I think that's something you clearly cannot force, but creating this frame of making things visible and saying things that would be unsayable for yourself makes yourself vulnerable, and that's I think a moment that opens up a space also for others to reflect on their own feelings and also to speak about this. Like I've talked with so many people after showing works, and a lot of them had no idea about this phenomena before. They didn't know any facts, and actually they didn't know any facts when coming out of this installation, for example, as well, but they felt like understanding it somehow on an emotional level, and I think that is something that transforms also something in them. And of course, there are always some who feel seen, and that is very sacred as well.
Hello? Yeah. Sorry. I've been told by people who've seen my work that it's given them hope. It's given them, they say I'm a courage teacher, teaching them to have courage. They say they don't feel alone, and they also say they feel some power. So that's what I've been told. But for me, it has got me off my knees and enabled me to stand tall.
I think the danger of art is some cases it goes into this more egocentric direction, and that's something that goes to me in the opposite direction of what it should be also if it relates to therapy. So, and I think it needs some personal motivation, but some connection with society, with the audience, with human beings in the end. So I think there is always a way to connect, and I think that's probably the most important thing of any art piece.
The connection is also empowering as well, obviously. Do we have time? Who do I look at for one more question from my side, or should we open for the audience? Short one? Okay. For Dolly, this question is very obvious, so I'm going to ask you too. How is, or in what way is your art political?
Connects to what I just said, I would say is political in the broader sense. So, at least from my experience, I don't know, I grew up really not giving space to body perception, to understanding feelings, giving space to that. And it was a bit discovered when that happened. And so that's still a big motivation that to bring it on. And to me, it has a political effect. Also considering, I mean, the stories we hear today, but I mean, unfortunately, it's no news about how mental illness is treated, and I think we see the values of this on certain kind of therapies, that where more space to what people have to say, to what people have to feel is given.
First of all, I think you cannot separate every working way from a political agenda. That's first of all what I think. And also, like I already mentioned it, since my experiences are framed in societal contexts, every time I speak about my experiences, I also make the realities of many oppressed and much more oppressed than myself visible. So I kind of like use my artistic language as a voice to make oppressed feel seen, but also to let the rest see them. And also, destigmatization in general is such an important part of systematic change in an inclusive sense. And I think inclusion itself is a very political issue as well. Yeah.
Do you want to add something? I don't want to exclude you from saying something to this.
No.
Thank you, then. Okay, let's hear questions from the audience, then. Does anybody have a question? I don't know where the microphone is.
So I wanted to ask a question to Marcello, because first, thank everyone. This was really an interesting and inspiring panel. But I was curious because Anika was mentioning about your own artwork triggering some emotion on you and also some states of mind. And we saw in the film that you were in your office at the university working a lot with the computer and hearing this voice over and over. So I wanted to ask you, how was the experience also for you of dealing with this issue and, for creating your installation, having to hear these voices over and over. And after we don't ask the artist, but for sure there was also an effect on you. So maybe if you can tell us also how you experience.
Yeah, that's... I never thought much about that, so that's a good question. I mean, I was also present when we did the recording together. Also, Lily was involved in the process. I mean, of course, it was intense, and because I also know a little bit of the stories behind each of the voice that was recorded, so because the person also described the context or maybe how this voice related to their previous experience. But it was not too shocking, I have to say, for me. Maybe because I personally have some anxiety issues, so I'm kind of familiar with this craziness, even though I never heard voices. But I'm kind of familiar with this internal state of tension and fear and extreme agitation. So and that's how I could relate also with them explaining that and so on. But yeah, while I was working with the sound, that was I could not work for too long because but I don't know if it was really because of the content. I think in general, so hearing all these voices, keeping that are triggered, are repeated all the time, it gets really stressful. That's for sure. I appreciated this positive voice of the touch that gives me, to me also, when we who of you saw the performance, to me gave really a nice, was both compositive. Sounded good, let's say, but also came a good meaning. It really resolved the session in a good way. So also when I was testing the sound, I was doing myself, okay, now I'm testing a bit of negative content voices, and then switch to the touch, and then also the negative voices are changing. So I had a double motivation to do that. So, so very mixed feeling, but not so disturbing, let's say. Maybe I want to add a small thing. We had only one event of using Sentire not with this voice format, where one person, we usually did the performance both in standing, like you saw today, but also in sitting. So one person sitting in front of each other with eyes closed. And this person was so touched, he reminded an interaction with her mom. I don't know if she was still alive or not, but he really got up to the point of crying because it was so intense, the situation. So something like that I never experienced.
Maybe I can add to that, because I recorded, I spoke some of the voices for one of our collaborator, and I don't know if you hear it in the movie, but at some point I have to scream, "Let me out of here," and I had to scream it over and over again in different, because he was explaining how it sounds, and we tried to get near to the exact sound, and I was near crashing in that moment, almost crying, and it was very intense. You don't see it in the movie, but it was very intense, and I wouldn't want to do it again, I think. Yeah. Okay. Other questions from the online audience? Yeah.
So it's about art institutions. And I was thinking about curators and how they might use the tormented artist story to promote their own work. Have you ever experienced any exploit, or by contrast, valuable support by the artistic system?
I have had some weird experiences with the art establishment, but more so from actually the outside art movement. I was asked to be part of a art fair, and when they saw my work, they said, no, your work doesn't look mad enough. And yeah, whenever I meet an art curator who has not had either personal experience of mental distress or psychosis, they project what they want onto me. They're not interested in listening to what I say. Although there are a couple of curators I've worked with who have said, no, I'm here to enable you to make something or say something. But mostly it's, and this is the problem with the psychiatry saying you can't trust a mad person, ever. If I criticize or I get angry, they say, just having an episode. So there's lots of things wrong with the system. And I think, one of the ways in the UK is that there are some curator programs where people who are, it's amongst disabled people, but disabled people are learning to be curators. And I think that's probably the best way forward.
There is a question back there also.
Yeah, first of all, thank you all. It was very interesting insights. I have a question for you, Anika. Like on your path, you kind of went into the analyzing of your own artworks and trying to find, I don't know, signs, I think you called it. And I was curious, you mentioned fleshness. Is there anything else that you kind of like felt it was somehow showing itself to be a part of what you go through in the process of painting? Like some other sign on, I don't know.
Yes, there's for sure a lot in the process, which is not maybe visible in the painting, but I also have a second characteristic which could be like seen in several paintings, and that is black dots. And these black dots It's funny that you asked because I had to cut them out of my presentation. Now I'm able to speak about it. These black dots are kind of like a sign for me for illness, but illness in a way how I feel ill. And every time these dots are coming up on the painting or also in film, when I'm filming, I know that's a sign of the painting getting ill some kind of way, which is representing myself. And the interesting thing about these dots are there's always a point where they can transform into some funny figures or some flowery stuff, and then I know, like also like in real life, I can transform these feelings into something else, which is cute.
I actually have one more question to her, if I can. I work actually very similar, and I did have it sometimes that people come up to me and they're like, what I see is triggering for me. Did you have these kind of like meetings with other people where they say, okay, your paintings are something so, I don't know, psychologically strong in a way that I feel something when I discover your art?
Yeah, for sure. And the interesting thing is that I had this also a lot when I was not contextualizing my work. So I was not telling like this painting is about trauma, this and that experience. Yeah. And still people were coming to me asking about my experience because they could refer. So that's also interesting. And for sure it's also when I'm contextualizing, then people come and say, wow, I just had like this compulsive episode. Thank you for showing this, blah, blah, blah. And also interesting is that for sure this interpretation is always a bit different, like as you come with your own experiences, but often they're quite coming to that point where I was also coming from.
We have a question right here in the front to the right. And then one more online question. Here. Very right person.
Yeah, so I'm trying to hide in the corner. 2 quick questions. How do you ensure that your artistic intervention authentically represents the cultural other in terms of interpretation of their life? Because there's a thing called cultural schizophrenia developed by Littlewood and Lipsil, and sometimes our art can be out of reality that the people are trying to portray. And there was a white psychiatrist that facilitated one of the sessions, and I've been doing a lot of work about how do we get white psychiatrists through autistic interventions to talk about their whiteness and how that actually operates in the mental health system in terms of racial equality.
I'm going to pull the trick you did yesterday and say I'm very tired because that's quite a complicated question. So thank you for that tip. But I want to talk to you about it because I'm interested in it. And you know, I give me 10 minutes. I will find a way to get white psychiatrists to do just that. Sorry.
Is it okay? You want someone else to answer?
A bit like you yesterday, mate. No, but yeah, it. Where's the mic?
Where's the mic?
No, I just wonder how we can get psychiatrists to talk about their vulnerabilities through art, because a lot of the work has been on the victims of mental health.
I've seen it try to be done. Many moons ago, do you know the Dragon Cafe? There was a kind of program called Recreate Psychiatry, and unfortunately, that was the aim, for people to talk about their privilege, their whiteness, their power, and to talk about the vulnerabilities. It started off very well, and it was supposed to be a co-production thing, and in the end, the psychiatrists had the power, and the survivors were nowhere to be to be seen. So I can see where it hasn't worked, and I think, yeah, we need to put our heads together and to kind of ensure these things. I mean, I do a lot of my work by myself, but I think I need to kind of also do kind of more kind of collaborative work as well. Yeah.
Now the online question, maybe.
So these topics are avoided within art colleges, despite experiences of distress feeding into the artworks. How do we enable, encourage, support art students to have this kind of conversations?
How do we enable art students to encourage and have these conversations within art learning and art education?
I've done work with the Bethlehem Gallery where they've gone to like universities like Goldsmiths, art kind of universities, and that's beginning to happen where people who are artists who have been labelled mad are speaking with university students and kind of, doing actually the beginning of collaborations. And unfortunately, I'm sure it's the same in Europe, that the UK university system is also making their students mad, and they begin to have those conversations. So yeah, it's happening in the UK, but very, very slowly, in my opinion.
I think it's not only an issue of arts. I would say it's a problem of our society. I think we need to talk more about these issues in general. And then I think naturally will also happen more into arts, because until we don't talk about that, we don't know them, and so it's a loop.
We showed our movie also yesterday at the big psychiatric congress that was mentioned just before, and we had an art therapy educator running an art therapy program in Berlin coming up to us who wanted to integrate it into her program. Maybe that's also a start. So through conferences like this, panels and movies and art, it gets publicity and then is maybe integrated into education as well. Okay, one more quick question. No? Sorry, then I took the time from the last question, but it also doesn't look like anybody has one more question, right? Then thank you everyone for this wonderful, wonderful time, and have a good night, and thank you that you stayed till the end.
So once again, thank you. I'll start just from here. Lily, Dolly, Anika, and Marcello for this panel, and also for wrapping up the whole conference with, art. So if you don't mind, we will just continue with Tatiana shortly on the stage. I could just... So once I just want to say thanks to everyone who took part. Thanks for the patience for staying with us so late on Saturday night. Oh my God, it's Saturday already. And thanks to all the speakers who took part on the conference, and I'm really happy that we had those conversations. I'm really happy that we started these conversations, and I think it opened up a lot of thoughts also for all of us personally, but also among us, also in the lab. So let's see, maybe we will continue in a certain format in the future. I would just like to say at the end that we have one more day of program. We have 2 more workshops tomorrow. I think they're fully booked. Yeah, pretty much booked. Yeah, there is maybe 1 or 2 spots in the trauma-informed design workshop. The other one is fully booked, but yeah, will be still 1 more day of more intense, yeah, a little bit of attention work with some of the participants on the conference, but also other people who joined only for this part, also thanks to Nada Bakar. So at the end, I want to mention again the membership card and end with that. And you know the details, you have seen them. I would now also like to give the word to Tatiana for introducing the further program in the near future.
Thank you, Elena. And before introducing the next program, also feel to thank you for your work curating this conference. Really has been very interesting and great so far. So I would say let's give an applause to Elena.
I'm a shy person, it's not fair, but thank you very much.
Yeah, but I think the audience said it all. And so we go on with what comes next at the Disruption Network Club. We have, as usually, many events, even if it's end of November, but we go on for a month almost. I want to announce our next conference that will be in March 24-26, always here at the Kunstquartier Bethanien. The title is called Smart Prison, Tracking, Monitoring and Control. And in this conference specifically, we will work on the recent developments in the creation of prisons and detention centers. And specifically, we will try to understand how technology and AI and smart technologies are used in this context, both of prison systems and also detention centers. And specifically also, we are already running an artistic project with Sean Veghezzi. He was a speaker on our previous Disruptive Friday that you can find online on our website. He was mentioning the story of the Vernon Seabain Center, that is a floating facility, prison facility in New York, in particular on the South Bronx, in which many people are detained and in prisons, even waiting for trial, and not many people know that this prison exists. It's just floating on the Bay of New York. So he's doing an artistic project about that, an investigation at the moment, also on public records and databases. And for our conference, he will be our keynote. He will show the result of the investigation, and he will also produce an artistic production by saying more about this prison. In connection with that, we have another Disruptive Friday that will be the 2nd of December. For the people that don't know, the Disruptive Friday is our online panel, and we will have very interesting speakers speaking about the discourse of technological violence towards migration and minorities group. And we will have Petra Molnar, that is working on migration and technology monitor, Martina Tazioli from Goldsmith, and also Yasmin Budiev, that is a researcher and technologist. And the title will be Algorithm of Violence, Border Management, Migration, and Enforced Discrimination. So please follow us. Will be the 2nd of December at 5, and we will be online on our website. And finally, we also want to mention our book, Whistleblowing for Change. I was very interested also that Dolly mentioned the discourse of art as evidence, because this is actually a chapter of our book. It's a book about the history of 30 people, among which whistleblowers, investigative journalists, artists, activists, lawyers, people working with social justice, and this is also, in a sense, the anthology of the Disruption Network Club that covers the stories and the practices of many of our speakers, that many are whistleblowers. You can find the book at the entrance if you are interested. Otherwise, you can also find it online, and there is a free EPUB, it's always good to say. So that was the announce from my side, and Elena will still introduce another project that we are doing.
Yeah, we have still some work to do until the end of this year. This is like quite a long-term project, actually. For 3 years, we are collaborating with the Regional Developmental Hub Caucasus from Georgia. And we had 2 previous editions. One was also a conference online, Hate News versus Free Speech in 2020, and also last year was the project Facing Disinformation. It's with the goal to strengthen civil society cooperation between Germany and Georgia, mostly between the 2 organizations that collaborate. And this year we are focusing on some topic that is also quite in our focus. Also in the next year, defeating gender inequality. So this is all funded by the German Federal Foreign Office, the Auswärtiges Amt. But this year also, as part of our program on December 16th, we will also have an online Disruptive Friday, which will focus on the results that were done in the past year in Georgia, but also on some future ideas that we have for the next year. So yeah, this will be also published after the conference, the content of this talk.
Thank you. And now we finally just want to keep you for other 5 minutes, because there is a very important moment, our tradition as Disruption Network Club, because this is the last conference, at least physical conference that we have this year. The other things will be online until end of December. And our tradition wants that I will call here all the team members that have been working at the Disruption Network Club for this year and also before. And we have a very nice flower ceremony. So I want to start, of course, with Elena Velianovska, that curated this conference.
And I will leave the stage.
No, stay.
Oh, stay, okay.
And since Elena is also part of the Vorstand, that many people in Germany know what it is, but otherwise, you know, we are a no-profit organization and there is a board. One member is Elena, together with me, and there is also Lorin De Carli, that is also our administration officer, so we call him here to get the flowers. So I want to thank both Lorin and also Elena. And now I'm going to call the rest of the team. Thank you. So the next one that I'm calling on stage is Özlem Kaya, our senior project manager. So thank you, Özlem. All the great things that you saw happening in these days here on stage is thanks on Özlem. Thank you. And then I want to call Nada Baker, that is working on the community and project manager. Thank you, Nada. You have been also working with us for a very long time. Thank you. And then I call here Jonas Franchi. That's all the psychedelic design you saw today is thanks to him. Thank you, Jonas. And very happy to call on stage Agnese Trocchi, that work on the digital communication management. And finally, Alice Bazzichelli, that has, I don't know who is giving the flower to you, okay, that work as communication assistant. And finally, I want to thank the other team that worked with us, the Bureau Doring for the press, in particular Tom Muller-Heuser and Janna Jakic, the streaming team, the Boiling Heads Media, all the people that did this great live streaming today. Thank you so much. Then a special thanks also to Maria Silvano for the photo. To Paolo Combes for the sounds. Thank you, Paolo. Francesco Mancori for the technological support. And also Torsten Oakden, that is not here, but will come later this night to take everything down, but he also did the tech support. And finally, also Anna at the cash desk and all the helpers that help us to build up this space and made this conference happen. So thank you so much to all the team. Then I saw that Elena wanted to reach me with something. Oh, thanks. Thank you. I don't have enough hands to keep my flowers, but so with that, I think we are done. Thank you all, and see you here in March, otherwise online. Thank you.